Welds in aluminium can fatigue and fail over time. That's why our panniers are riveted, like aircraft. Metal Mule. Engineered to be different.
My name is Christian Brix, and I recently returned from a one-year trip around Africa and Asia, travelling 30,000 miles through 33 countries. I think like a lot of people, I got into motorcycle riding after wandering through a bookshop and picking up a copy of Jupiter's Travels. Pretty straightforward. Not long after that, I got my CBT, had a 125 for a year, learnt the basics, and then got a full license, got a 600cc and started doing trips across Europe. Just got the bug. Not at all. I was always a big traveller before. Travelled a lot when I was younger. My mother was an air stewardess, so she dragged me around the world quite often, and I'd always had the travelling bug. And then when I read Jupiter's Travels, the two sort of came together. My love of adventure and travel and learning was perfect for the motorcycle and the freedom that it gave me. And it just all sort of came together in a perfect storm, leading to a big trip. Was it ready for that one? Before going on this trip, I was just working a straightforward job, Monday to Friday, 9 to 5, working on a really big project to build something, which I really enjoyed. But I always dreamt of, I guess, doing this. And my work has a great sabbatical policy, where if you work for them for 10 years, you're eligible for 1 year sabbatical. So I kind of always had that as a long-term vision and worked away, but under the assumption that one day I would take that window to make a trip. So my first big trip, I got a new bike. It was used, but it was new to me. It was only 10 or 11 months old, but it was a 2015 Yamaha XT 660Z Tenere. I intended to take it down the west coast of Africa to Cape Town. I think London to Cape Town has a certain romanticism to it, and it's one of the sort of Mount Everest of overlanding, if you like, and then back up the east coast. And that was the original route. Didn't quite go to plan, but that's what I set out to do. It's really difficult to say exactly what I was hoping to achieve. I think I wasn't exactly happy with life as it is, and I think the trip gave me a sort of purpose, and I really enjoyed the preparation stages for it and building up to it. I think there was a certain element of I didn't really understand Western society, and this was something that was kind of, I guess, a rebellious move away from it to see something different and try and understand life from a different perspective, to try and maybe understand it better. And I think the root was dissatisfaction in modern life, and not really understanding the world that I find myself in, and wanting this trip to be some sort of exploration further into that, to hopefully find somewhere, I guess, some childish notion of a better place that would be more suitable for me. Yeah, I guess you could use the word escape, but I think it's more sort of a moving forward to try and discover something new, or maybe there was something that I'd missed, and wanting to reframe this life and see it from a different angle. So you could say escape, but for me it was more a case of delving further into that side of things to try and discover more, as opposed to running away from them. That makes sense? The whole year for me was a long-term vision to make the trip and write the book, and it was all part of it. So while I was on the road, I was taking quite a lot of notes, and when I got back, I built in time before I returned to work so I could sit down and actually write a first draft of a book. That was always the plan, and I'd always wanted to write, and I think the trip gave me a structure to work to. I was kind of good at the rambling bits and the thoughts of being under the helmet and travelling, and that bit I enjoyed, but I never thought I could structure a story that long. And the trip naturally just gave me that structure. And in the end, it was actually, I guess, in a way, therapy to write the book. It wasn't something that I kind of wanted to do in the end, it was something that I had to do, and I couldn't really process the trip until I'd done it. I think when you make a trip like this, it's hard to answer a question like, was it what you expected? A trip like this sticks with you for years, and you will continue to learn the lessons from it for your entire life. So it's still filtering through. I'm still learning about it. I still think about West Africa every day, 2 years on, and expect I still will 10 years on, and maybe longer. So it's always something that sits with you, and the lessons continue to happen as you go through life. I often think the hardest lessons in life take the longest to learn, and I'm still working out my impressions of Africa and kind of the effect it had on me. In terms of the final effect of my trip, I can't say. It's not over in a way. For me, it was always about the mental journey, not necessarily the physical one. Changing your physical destination encourages new thoughts and new ways of thinking, and it's in sort of an ongoing process, which is still happening. When I got back, in many ways I regarded it as one of the biggest failures of my life, because I wasn't culturally adventurous as I'd had been in the past on my travels, because fear had sort of overtaken me, and it was a struggle, and it was all in my head. Nothing went wrong, no one tried to rob me, or there was no dangerous situations whatsoever, but it was myself, and it was doubt and confusion and my mind really not working properly, and I regarded it as a massive failing. But we don't really learn from our successes, we learn from our failures, and the lesson, like I said, they're ongoing and they keep happening. When I got back from my trip, as nothing had really happened, I didn't crash, I didn't break down, I didn't get arrested, I didn't get sick. I just filed it away as another trip. I went out with some friends in town and thought, oh, that wasn't really that big of a deal. And then I sat down to actually read through my notes. I completely broke down, and there was tears, and I remembered all of the doubt and confusion and the fear. It was like, that was a big deal. And then I sat down to write immediately, and it was a very visceral, sort of raw process where I felt like I just cut myself open and kind of let go, and it was really cathartic. Although it was difficult, at the same time, to get it out was what I needed to do, and I felt much better as a result. And you don't self-publish for the money. There's no money in this. You do it for the conversations and the people you meet. And the payback for me has been people in my family reading the book and going, I never knew you thought like that. And I'm like, I gave all the signs and all this, and they said, I never knew that. And the conversation is so much richer and so much more interesting a result. And friends have come up to me and said, I've always thought like that, and I've never known how to talk about it. And you've opened the door, and while it's a really difficult chat, it's very cathartic, and it just feels new, interesting, and just more honest, which is lovely. I would never ever be able to say in front of a group of people that I've had struggles with mental health before I wrote that book. Now that I've done it and people are talking about it, and also they have issues as well, it's a really wonderful process, which has been a journey that's still happening, and I'm not going anywhere. It's happening while I sit here now, which is fascinating, and for me that's the payback of why we travel. It's a change in perspective. I think mental health is, and the balance of enjoying and not enjoying is always a taboo subject, and yeah, we should be totally grateful. I mean, we're incredibly lucky to be able to do these things that we're doing, but yeah, I think this has long been overly glamorized as a subject, and people do a lot to dial up the greats, but not necessarily the lows of it. And I think the world's changing. I think people are more open and honest about mental health now, and it's like opening room for that conversation. In the past, especially English people are completely against psychoanalysis, absolutely hate it. But these days, people are just being a bit more honest. And these days, here at Overland this year in 2019, there's some wonderful speakers that are just being brutally honest about the underside as well as the overside. And I think that's the thing, is managing on the road, especially solo, is the highs can be euphoric and the lows can be, where's the nearest bridge, I need to jump off it, bad. And you need to be able to go back and forth every day between that range, because you'll be up and down and up and down. If you're on your own, you don't have anyone to consult with or chat with, it can become a bit of a mental game and a bit of a struggle. And I think more and more people are talking about it, which is a good thing. But I also think still travel. I mean, yeah, it can be bloody scary, but that's where you're going to learn about yourself and your limits and the world around you. And I think everyone should try it one day. Yeah, it's quenched my thirst for wanderlust in a big way. So now I'm doing probably 2 or 3 weeks across Europe. Did the Gibraltar race and really enjoyed that. But yeah, one of the things I sort of highlighted in the book was the length of travel. And if you've never been away from home for a year, especially through such challenging circumstances, it can become a bit of a struggle. For me, I put it as a reset. So kind of, in a way, a typical cycle. We build up to going somewhere, we do a bit of research, we make a list of the stuff we want to see, we probably fly out, we ride out, we spend 2 weeks and we make the effort and we see everything, we try everything, we talk to it, and we come back knackered, but we've had a really good time. And then we kind of internalize what we learned and we reset, and then we sort of move forward. When you're overlanding, that process doesn't happen because you're traveling for months and months and months. So resetting becomes quite difficult. And if you're not careful, you can end up with this huge weight of experiences, and you lead to intake overload, which can be struggle. And I didn't realize that until I'd done this trip, until I'd been away for over 10 months. And it was like, as soon as I got home, I began to reset. And the first week was amazing. It was like a washing machine and clean food and just comfortable. And then when the reset did happen, it hit like a ton of bricks. And that was the difficult part. And I almost felt like a foreigner in my own country. So the first book came out as The Unseen Walls. It talks about the Africa portion. The second book, I'm halfway through, and it's about the Asia part of it, which is a slightly easier trip. But the first one in Africa really was about my preparation and the first sort of timid steps as I've headed south, when it all kind of came undone in West Africa. And I guess it shook me for the rest of my trip onwards. And just dealing with the attention and being an introvert on the road, I didn't appreciate how much of a struggle that might be, and I think it's something that every traveller needs to know before they set out, whether they're more introverted or extroverted, because it can really change the quality of the experience you have. And yeah, I think it's good for anyone who's considering a similar route on their own, specifically solo travel. Traveling in a group is a totally different dynamic, and I don't think I would have had half the struggles I did if I had other people with me who were seeing and experiencing the same things as me. So it's just coming to grips with that, and I guess coming face to face with fear for the first time in my life. I thought I was well travelled, and West Africa schooled me immediately. I felt like a 5-year-old and had absolutely no idea what was going on, and I think that stuck with me for probably the rest of the Africa trip, and the book kind of chronicles that, and I guess in a way how I dealt with it, or maybe how I didn't deal with it, and what I learned along the way. And it really taught me about the power of fear, and I think that's what that book is about. And the second book is more about where you go from there and into more logic, I would say. When I was in Asia, it was a little bit easier. It wasn't such an immediate struggle, so it gave my mind more room to roam and to think, and there was a lot of realizations along that road. And so I went into the second book, but like I said, it's more about logic and applying some of what I learned. I think if you're not used to spending a lot of time on your own as an extrovert, you can struggle. If you are as an introvert, that could be the best time for you, is when you're on your own on the bike in your helmet and just letting thoughts kind of breeze through your brain, and it's quite a nice process. What was new to me is that I'd always done it in sort of Western society, and I'd not really seen conflicting or distressing imagery, so I didn't kind of have any issues. When I was out there in the developing world, a lot of what I was seeing really disturbed me, and I really could have done with talking to someone, and there was no one there to talk to that shared my sort of language and values and customs, and or that was seeing it for the first time. And if you're in a group and you have a beer and you cathartically process it every day, then it makes it easier. And I never recognized that before, because in all my travels as an introvert, I'd just done my own thing and kept to myself and been fine. This was the first time I struggled with that, and the weight kept kind of adding up on me. So yeah, you want that moment under the helmet to let your thoughts just go, but if you're in a conflicting or a distressing place, it can take you to some unintended places, and it can be heavy. Ultimately, travel's been the best thing for me. It's been the biggest education I've ever had. School never taught me half the things I've learned on the road, and it continues to inspire and educate, and I think it's essential. I wish more people could do it. I think we live in a very different world if they did. Obviously not everyone has that fortune, that privilege, but I wouldn't be me without it. So yeah, it's been one of the biggest influences, if not the biggest influence on my life, and I support it. So if you want to find out more, certainly about the next book coming up, you can follow me on Instagram. Just look for Christian Brix. The book is available on Amazon. If you do pick one up, it is self-published, so apologies if there's a typo here or there, and reviews just mean the world. If you wouldn't mind reviewing it, it would be super helpful, because unless people talk about something like this, nothing really happens with the book. You've got to be willing to push it, and every little bit and support helps all of us.
Our panniers have a double-thick rim at the base, keeping damage from the inevitable bumps, scrapes, and offs to the outside of the pannier. Metal Mule. Engineered to be different.